All right. It's 3 o'clock and we are recording this session. So I'm going to begin and people can jump in and join us whenever it works for them. So I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar with the School Sim. I'm very excited to be here. My name is David Jong, and I am the Dean of the College of Education at Dakota State University. So before this, I was a 3rd and 4th grade teacher, and then I was a principal and a superintendent for 8 years. And then I went into higher ed, and I was a professor for 7 years. And now just since June, I've been a dean. And let me tell you, being a dean is not for the faint of heart. Not quite as easy as what I might have thought it was going to be. So, but what happened was, I talked about this a little bit ago. About 7 years ago, I stumbled across a simulation at a breakout conference in San Diego. And in just 10 minutes, I was like, of seeing a simulation, I was like, this is the best tool out there to get people talking about what we need to talk about. So I started experimenting with different ways to facilitate them. And today I'm just going to lead you through a cultural competency simulation and get us talking. So a little bit of background on this. Simulations, they're already used all over the place. And the founder of this company was like, why not for school leadership? Why not getting people talking about leadership and why they make the decisions that they make? And which kind of led to a slogan, what is basically experience is the best teacher. And what I've learned after using these simulations is they provide a safe experience for people to have, that there are no real consequences, yet you get the experience, the consequences of your decision. So that's one of the reasons why I love them so much. And when I started with facilitating them, there were 16 simulations in the library, and now there are close to 40. So that kind of tells you they're growing just because of the demand. There are different ways to use the simulation, synchronously, asynchronously, in person, and video conferencing. So like I would call this synchronously via Zoom is how I'm going to show you how to use a simulation. But there's a pattern to facilitating them to get the most people talking, and I'm going to just model that for you today. Now, what happened was the simulation started with just for school principals, the simulation company. And when people saw that, they were like, you know what? We need those for teachers. We need those for school counselors. We need those for superintendents. And so the company used to be called Ed Leadership Sims, and they grew to School Sims because of the demand from people like you and people out there in the field using them. And also these simulations, they're aligned to the standards. So I don't have to get into the details, but you just should know that they try to develop simulations that are hitting all of the normal professional standards that are out there. And in fact, in the last year and a half, they developed a portal with their company that you can sort by the standard that you want to lead. So if you were leading this for other people, one way to figure out which one to use, you would just sort it based on your goal, based on the standard that you wanted to cover. It's a pretty slick process. So if you wanted to take a picture of this with your phone, you could, your QR code, and that would take you to the School Sims website, or just do a Google search for School Sims. You won't offend me in the least if you poke around on the website while we are digging into this. So I am now going to switch my screen.
Now see, I'm going to say this. If it had been Mendon and Carl had done that to me, they would have been like, who's this guy?
No, they would have
Why
no
is he
idea.
on the wall? This guy's on the wall.
Sorry about that. There we go. All right. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you the cultural competency simulation, which is actually one of my all-time favorite simulations because of how it plays out. And what these simulations are like is they're like those choose your own adventure books that you may have read as a kid, where I think I read all those books where if you're on an adventure, and if you want to go to the cave, go to page 47. If you want to go to the beach, go to page 50. And it just keeps branching out based on your decision. That's how these are set up. So we can't go backwards in the sim, but we're going to experience it all together right now. So this is the landing page for cultural competency. And here, what they're all HTML based. So they load. Now, this one was made by our partners in Gwinnett County Public Schools in Atlanta. They're great. And they're all in on simulations, and they helped to author this one. This just tells us that we cannot go backwards in the simulation.
Welcome to the Cultural Competency Simulation. In this activity, you will play the role of a new principal facing several leadership challenges. This simulation provides a context for addressing cultural competency within a school community. The simulation will take you through various stakeholders and data points to consider as you make decisions on how to proceed. Be sure to respond authentically to each situation, as there is no right or wrong answer.
All right.
Reminder also, as soon as the bell rings, group
You can hear I'm in my wife's office. She's a K-12 curriculum director right now. Sorry about that. Next slide.
You have just completed your first month as the newly appointed principal of Waterside School. To better address changing demographics, the school district has recently realigned its mission to creating high-quality learning experiences that meet the needs of every child. Within your first 30 days as the principal, you have reviewed local school data, observed teaching and learning throughout the building, and spoken to community members and school stakeholders. The PTA is a strong part of the school community. The PTA chair, Mrs. Ashley Roberts, has been in the role for the past 3 years. She is a sounding board for parents as they navigate the school community. She is also an avid supporter of the teaching staff and works to ensure that they have the necessary resources to provide effective instruction. Many of the staff bring a great sense of spirit to the school, especially Mr. Thomas Henton. Mr. Henton is a popular veteran teacher who actively participates in school community events and is well liked by students and staff. Your mentor, Sabrina Fisher, is an experienced principal within the district. You meet with her to share your experiences and insights.
All right. Now remember,
This information will be available in your files below throughout the simulation.
so in this simulation, all of you are a newly appointed principal, right? And that Thomas Henton was mentioned. He's going to be a key character in this simulation.
As you meet with your mentor, Sabrina Fisher, to reflect on your first 30 days, you share your initial thoughts about the academic state as well as the culture of Waterside. During classroom visits, you notice that the gifted courses lack student diversity, while the academic intervention courses were largely populated with students of color. Teaching practices do not seem to have changed much among veteran teaching staff in the face of growing diversity. In speaking with groups of students, you find that they believe they are not being challenged and that learning activities are not relevant to their future success. In fact, there seems to be some inequity in terms of learning opportunities for students and a lack of cultural competency on the part of teachers. In talking with parents, you learn that some are concerned with the way that the school is changing and believe that their child should learn in an environment that was similar to theirs when they attended Waterside. You quickly notice the strength of the school, that students are eager to learn. You share with your mentor that you know you have a lot of work to do in creating a culture and academic environment that will ensure the success of each child. After meeting with your mentor, you settle into your office and glance at your inbox. A few emails stand out.
All right. So what's going to happen now is this is meant to simulate the real life of a principal, right? We're going to get some emails. We're going to get somebody stopping from the teacher's lounge, maybe our assistant principal stopping by. Let's see what happens next. We get an email from our superintendent. To follow up on our conversation a few weeks ago, I'm excited that you are leading this school towards our vision of effectively supporting every child and improving cultural diversity and equality with academic rigor and cultural competency in our curriculum. As we discussed, the significant shift within the district's demographics presents a major challenge in terms of balancing the needs and perspectives of our legacy families with those who are new to the school and coming from different cultural backgrounds. Within the community, some parents are expressing concern regarding perceived discrepancies in grading, discipline, and expectations in the classroom setting between students from our traditional population and those who have recently migrated here. I'd like you to identify some of the challenges specific to your school with regard to these disconnects. check back with me later in the quarter to discuss the support you may be needed from me.
Now, I haven't investigated this yet. However, I've been hearing some grumblings among the teachers, expressing concerns at the low level of participation of many of the new students. Also, I'm hearing that there have been several discipline issues coming up with Mr. Henton's gifted class. I wonder what's going on there. Anyhow, hope you have a good day.
All right, so there's our assistant principal letting us know that he's hearing some issues about Mr. Henton. Let's see what happens next.
Hi, this is Mrs. Baldwin. My son Andrew is in Mr. Henton's social studies class. I really need to talk to you. I'm not happy with the way Mr. Henton is teaching my son. Clearly, he doesn't believe that my son is capable of learning at a high level, and that's a problem. Call me back as soon as you get this message so I can come in and meet with you.
All right, now a parent wants to meet with us about Mr. Henton.
Hey, I wanted to make sure you got a piece of cake from the party. It's great to celebrate your first 30 days. Latest from the teacher's lounge is grumble about all the new students. I even heard that Mr. Henton said that he wonders if half of them can even speak English. They never participate in his class. Then he joked that he needs to learn a new language or two. Oh, did you want a piece of cake?
All right, now we're hearing the gossip from the teacher's lounge.
Which would you focus on first?
Here's what happens. We came to our first decision point. Now I'm going to throw up a Zoom poll, and I'm going to ask each one of you to vote on which one you would choose. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to talk about which letter you chose and why. So really it's as simple as that. So here comes the poll. I just launched it right now. Here are our choices. What are we going to do first in this situation? The first option, meet with the PTA leaders. The second option, review discipline referrals. The third option, arrange a meeting with Mrs. Baldwin, who was the one that left the voicemail. Or D, follow up directly with Mr. Henton on his comments. Looking for, we already have 3 different responses in this group of people. How awesome is that? And they're all about even. So on my screen, I can see all your little votes coming in, which is awesome. All right, give everybody time to vote. And what we're gonna use breakout rooms right now. And I am going to make them so there's like 3 or 4 participants in the room. And we're just gonna talk for 2 minutes. And all I want you to do is talk about what letter you chose and why. Also, you should know that there are, in this room right now, we have people that chose the first, second, third, and fourth option. So you may go. Welcome back, everybody. A few people are coming back. A few people are using the full time. Laura, as we're waiting for everybody to join us, what did your group talk about?
We talked about the importance of calling the parent back within the 24 hours, but we also talked about really doing your homework and getting background information before you make a phone call.
Good. So there was support for 2 responses. So you wanted to get a little bit of information first, but then right away get back to that parent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good reason. How long do you think it would take you to get the data that you wanted? Is that all or not really?
I don't know.
No, that's good.
But I
Great.
would do my best to get it quickly and review it quickly. At least have some information, maybe not every detail, but I would definitely want to have some background knowledge.
Yeah, that's good. Welcome back, everybody. Laura and I were just talking about the idea of getting some background discipline information first, and then right away going after calling the parent back right away. So
3 also head outside.
as you
Thank
look at the options, the data that came back, it seems like the third option showed up the most. Any thoughts on how people voted? Any surprises out there? I'm looking for one brave soul to say that's right or that's not right.
I'm just surprised that more people didn't choose option 3, just because anytime I get a phone call from a parent, I don't ever want to get that. I didn't get that back to them right away. So even if
Sure.
it's just to listen to them and hear what they got to say.
Sure. So Rob, as a leader, you get an angry parent, you will do your best to drop everything you can to get back and try to handle that as most quickly and efficiently as you can. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah, good.
I do
I
want to,
I wouldn't want to talk to a parent without having some information. So I honestly, I chose 4 just because I want to start building that relationship with Mr. Henson, because I feel like a lot of these issues are stemming there. So starting to
Sure.
build that relationship and understanding what his perspective is, what his problems are. And I want information when I call a parent that I can speak, from a place where I have some information to share or not share, or how to proceed. I don't want to go in blind to
Yeah.
that conversation. But I agree, it needs to be dealt with promptly, but I
just-
want to know some things before I call the parent.
if I could just say one thing, in this world of social media now, I noticed that parents are very quick to put things on PTA website, whatever it is, any kind of blog. And many of my friends who are principals, as I said, I'm retired now, but they're really dealing with that because it becomes one parent can really reach out to so many people on social media that I think that if we don't address that concern of the parent, too sweet quickly, other unanticipated consequences could arise. But I mean, I think all the responses are important. But this parent thing with vis-a-vis social media, it's kind of like cryptocurrency. It scares me a little bit. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's hard to say you'll just choose one of these, because I think you do some things concurrently. So yeah, do I go to the teacher first? It's always been my practice whenever I get a phone call, good, bad, or indifferent, and say, I've got this phone call, I'm going to call her back. You tell me what you want to tell me. And I pass no judgment. I just listen to them. I call the parent, and just like other people said, listen to what they have to say, and maybe I'll have to follow up with them again after more research, or try to connect them to talk to the teacher. But I agree with, I believe it was Margaret that said, I think I've learned the hard way. If you do not call back, it doesn't take it too long for an unhappy parent to post something somewhere. All
right. So we have to pick one of these answers, and not everybody agrees, but there's general consensus that there's good in a lot of these different responses, but the most people chose C. So we're going to choose C, and we're going to see how that plays out. See what happens next.
In the text box below, describe your rationale for your choice of top priority.
We just did that as a large group.
Before you can act on any priority, you are approached by Mr. Turner, a parent who insists on meeting with you immediately. His daughter was disciplined for disruption in Mr. Henton's gifted class.
All right, let's meet another parent.
My daughter Kira was issued a disciplinary referral and sent to the office on Friday for not having a pencil in Mr. Hinton's gifted social studies class. In her last school, my daughter was an honor roll student. She has never, ever been in trouble at school before. Yes, we are new to the school, but we had heard so many good things, and we were really looking forward to the challenges the gifted classes would bring. Instead, in the first month at Waterside, my daughter was issued a disciplinary referral by Mr. Hinton. And when I heard the reason she didn't bring a pencil to class, I almost fell over. This is ridiculous. I heard that Mr. Hinton has lent other students pencils in the past. What is going on?
Conflict with discipline guidelines. How will you respond to Mr. Turner's issue?
All right, I am going to throw open a Zoom poll again, and I'm going to have you vote on which choice is best for you. Votes are pouring in. We already have 3 options. Whenever I'm facilitating this, I just love it when people choose different options. It's my favorite. All right, here we go. I'm going to send you into a group again. Here we go. You may talk for 3 minutes this time. What letter did you choose and why? Welcome back, first group. Did you have agreement in your group or were you all over the place?
We were all over the place. It was fantastic. And we loved these simulations. We will say this is phenomenal.
Good.
And the first time we all agreed, and now each one of us chose a different response. And it was great. Right, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, when I facilitate this in person, I'll bring a really nice coffee mug from my university and I'll ask, did anybody change their mind when they were listening to their peer in their group? And finally somebody will slowly raise their hand and I give them a coffee mug and I'm like, you know what? I go, it is good as leaders to listen with an open mind to your peers or your mentors. And over a long period of time, you will make many more good decisions if you listen to others rather than just always act on what you think is best. So I always try to promote that. And I think these simulations point out that by listening to your peers or your mentors, you can be a better leader.
Phil,
Anyway.
Could you tell them what it reminded you of? Because I thought that was rather interesting, these simulations.
Yeah, it reminds me of the certification test. The administrative certification test was very similar to this in terms of getting scenarios and emails and board policies and things like that, having to decide from there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All
right.
right.
You did get to this great discussion, and so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. I shared the results, and it looks like a little over half of us, 54%, said the third option. Any thoughts about that, or any thoughts that you'd like to share about what you talked about in your group?
Our group just talked. We all chose number 2, saying that you'd investigate and get back to the parent. I felt, at least personally, that the appeasing would come from 2 by saying I have to investigate this and look. I think politically too, an option would be to speak to Mr. Hetton afterwards, and it might be a way to build a relationship by saying, hey, normally I talk to you first, but this parent just happened to show up, give me the details on what happened. And in the meantime, I'm sure Mrs. Baldwin is probably posted on Facebook by now from the first situation. So we got to deal with that next.
Yeah, that's a good point, that when it rains, yes, it's you feel that pit in your stomach that when it rains, it pours. And that, it's the same as a teacher. When you have a naughty kid in your class, you all of a sudden hear everything that kid ever did in their life. It's the same for leaders, that when something goes wrong with somebody you're leading, you'll start to hear, it'll just spiral out of control with that. So Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the poll. I am going to dive into or choose letter C, and we are going to see what happens next.
Mr. Turner says, I expect to hear from you by the end of the day, or I will tell others what is happening at this school.
There you go. There you
Kind
go.
of icy response.
As the day goes on, you realize you won't have much time to look into the discipline issue raised by Mr. Turner. You send him a quick email noting you are working on it, and then ask AP Griffin to follow up this afternoon.
All right, our assistant principal is going to dive into it now. There he dove into it and he comes back with an email to us. Our assistant principal says, I spoke with Mr. Henton this afternoon about the issue raised by Mr. Turner and tried to get Mr. Henton's side of the story. Mr. Henton acknowledged that he sent Kira Turner to the office, but characterized her behavior as disruptive. He doesn't believe he did anything wrong and feels he is justified by his application of the discipline policy. All right.
As promised, you follow up with Mr. Turner, letting him know that upon your investigation, you did uncover some areas of growth for your school and teachers in the areas of effective discipline. You assure him that you will continue to monitor the situation for all discipline policies implemented by teachers moving forward. Mr. Turner states that he is grateful for your investigation and follow-up in addressing his concerns.
Okay.
You are in your office Friday after school has let out when you are visited by Mr. Henton.
How good, how real of a scenario is that? Like, of course it's Friday after school. That just tells you that this was written by somebody in the trenches, right? So that's classic. Hey, before I push next, so I have a quick question from Jacqueline Hill. If you choose a different response, it would change the next steps, or is it always the same flow of responses? It depends. Sometimes, like if you have 4 choices, it's 4 completely separate answers. And sometimes it will go to the next one no matter what you choose. So most of the time it branches off though. There we go. Let's see what he has to say.
I had a visit from AP Griffin earlier this week. Asked me about one of my discipline referrals. I have never had to justify my application of discipline policies before, and I was surprised to be asked to do so. I will not tolerate the disruption caused by a student not being prepared in my gifted class. This has never been an issue. Students love me because I hold them to a higher standard. The parents know this too. I have higher expectations of these kids, and I am just not going to tolerate disruptive behavior in my gifted class.
All right. He doesn't seem like he's budging much.
After Mr. Henton departs, you are left wondering if you should let this incident go or follow up further. Mr. Henton is a popular teacher, and you've only just finished your first month. You're not sure pursuing this issue right now is the best course of action. Well, the week is over. You'll have to return to this issue on Monday.
I'm going to go down a rabbit trail here.
Really?
This is classic. When I'm leading this with like novice leaders or inexperienced leaders, I know that you are not that. But if I lead this with them, I said, this is very common to have a situation come up where it's bothersome all weekend. And then you have to learn how to like tuck that away or deal with that and still be present with the people that you love and that you may spend time with on the weekends. And that's a real skill that leaders have to lead. And then I talk about how to develop that skill. But anyway, that's a rabbit trail, but it's very real learning lesson for young leaders.
The following week starts with a scheduled meeting with Mrs. Baldwin, the mother who had issues regarding her students' performance in Mr. Henton's class. But first, a peek at your inbox and perhaps someone stopping by your office.
I'll bet it's the person that the teacher lounge gossip lady. Let's see here. Okay, we have an email back from our superintendent again. As we've discussed, along with the changes in the composition of the community, some parents have expressed concerns with the classroom grading and student test results. Please investigate and pinpoint any of these discrepancies with teachers. But tread lightly. We're making progress on student performance, and I'd hate to take our eyes off those goals. By the end of the week, please send me an actionable plan for addressing this issue.
You get an email from a colleague who noticed this post on social media and forwarded you a screen grab.
All right. I remember the good old days when a teacher was given full reign over how to best manage their classroom and how to best meet the needs of our students. Say goodbye to autonomy, Waterside teachers. I don't really think he talks like that. That's just what I picture in my head. Here we go. Another email from the PTA chair. I forwarded the minutes from our PTA meeting last week. Please note the number of parents who are still addressing concerns about the shifts in our school demographics and how they are being handled. I'd like to invite you to our next meeting to address the increased diversity of the school, as well as the realigned vision and mission for the school. Thanks, Ashley.
Thinking about what you would present to the PTA meeting, what would your key points be?
All right, I'm going to ask you to go to the chat feature right now and just write one point or one sentence of what you would bring to the PTA meeting as you are preparing for this. If you'd be willing to do that, that would be awesome. Bob, asset-based, I like that. Assessment scores, listen and learn. I'm trying to capture some of these. Positivity, that's a great idea. Demographic data, that's awesome. All right, I know some people are still finishing up and writing. You can still do that, but I just wanted to capture some of those. And I also wanted to keep this going. Data from culture and climate surveys. That's great too. Okay, here we go. Moving on.
Well, the lounge is a buzz about Mr. Hinton's social media post over the weekend. I assume you saw it? The one in which he called out interference in his class management? You know he plays favorites. He loves talking sports. And if you're not into sports, you're excluded from the conversation. Word on the street is that athletes in his classes rarely get discipline referrals. But look out for Mr. Hinton today. His favorite team lost yesterday, which I'm sure will be the main topic of discussion in all his classes.
Okay.
I have some concerns about what's being taught in my son Andrew's social studies class. My son failed Mr. Hinton's last test. And do you know why? Because Mr. Hinton is not covering the material on his own test. Now, at the same time, Andrew is not challenged by Mr. Hinton. Seems a lot of time in the class is spent on things unrelated to teaching and learning, like sports. I confronted Mr. Hinton with that, and do you know what he said? That it really didn't matter for my child in this class, that anything would be too difficult for Andrew, that he didn't want to give him any more work than he could handle. This is totally unacceptable behavior from Mr. Hinton. You know, he may not have high expectations for my son, but I do. This can't continue. I need you to take care of this immediately.
All right, that's Mrs. Baldwin.
After meeting with Mrs. Baldwin, you take a closer look at Mr. Hinton's file. You notice that his evaluations are satisfactory, but not stellar. Grades in his general classes are consistently high, but good grades in his gifted class are hard to come by. Oddly, most of his discipline referrals are from his gifted class. Earlier in the year, you popped into Mr. Hinton's class for a quick informal evaluation. You were struck at how much time is given over to discussing recent professional sports games, even with you in the room. Maybe this was a warming up at the start of the school year. If so, it has gone on too long. What is the best course of action?
All right, I'm going to relaunch the poll. And you may vote. We have two different answers with one of them dominating. Cool. Let's keep this one at the full group here. Instead of sending you into the small group, I'm going to show you the results. And we have 91% of you are saying the third option, go and talk directly to Mr. Henton. What are your thoughts on that? Like, it feels like he's crossed the line where it's time to go and talk to him. What are you thinking?
I think he has to be made aware that there's multiple complaints about him, and then try and gather some feedback. Depending on his response, you might stop that conversation and invite him back with union representation. But I think the initial conversation really has to be, you have to be forward with him about what's going on.
Yeah.
I will also want to be clear with him about my concerns about his social media post as well. Obviously you want to be tactful on kind of how you're communicating that. We all have a freedom of expression, but pretty unprofessional to be, broadcasting your concerns, particularly without, really a full opportunity to kind of process and work through it. And I'd kind of ground it in like, I want to develop a relationship with you. We need to have trust, those types of things.
Yep. So that's still burning in your background, that social media post, huh Phil?
For me, it was another layer of like, up until now, like I need to investigate what's going on and all these other things. Here's something that like you did. Like, it's just, there's not much to investigate it. Here it is. People are talking about it. This is disruptive, again, I'd be kind of thankful, but it's just not appropriate. It's not professional.
Yep. Great. Anybody else?
I would like to think that I would have had a conversation with him before this, like as things are coming up, I think you have a conversation. To me, this one was like a scheduled meeting, like an actual, let's sit down. And now first we talked about the first parent complaint. We talked about maybe some discipline that's come from your classroom, but now let's talk about the whole big picture and where all of this is coming from with your social media and part of it. As your principal, I want to be able to support you, but to support you, we have to make sure all the practices that you have in your classroom are in line with the culture of our entire building.
Great.
And I think I would
pull it together holistically. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think I would be likely to follow that with not a formal memo, but a written email of like, let's recap our meeting from today. I want some important parts that we talked about were this, and I think I would schedule a follow-up. Like, I'm going to check back in with you in 3 weeks. You'll see me in your classroom between now and then let's sit down and talk again in 3 weeks and see if things have started to settle or if this continues to be a problem.
A wonderful way to document what happened in a one-on-one conversation as a follow-up or follow-up email after the meeting. Great point. Anything else?
I just wanted to say that I'm not sure, certain schools have APs that are responsible for certain teachers or grade levels or content areas. I'm not quite sure of AP Griffin's role in all this, but if conversations are going to be had with Mr. Henton, it might be advantageous to also include the AP in it so that everybody, is on the same page.
Great point. Talk to Mr. Henton with the caveat of including the AP. I love it. All right,
I think as a new administrator to the building, you have to go back and try to dig up historical facts that happened before. You look at the PTA are asking them to get out, or they don't know what he doesn't know what the PTA has done over the last 2 or 3 years. The same thing with Mr. Henton. He doesn't know if the guy had 50 referrals a year before or whatever. He's got to start digging to get some stuff. As a matter of fact, the assistant principal, I don't know how long he's been there, but if he's been there for a few years, obviously he's accepted what Mr. Henton has done. So he might not be the one that you want to send out there at the beginning. You know, there's right now, Mr. Henton is a long-term problem. Okay. And it's not you're not going to resolve that with one incident. You ain't try to build a bridge, and that's great. But there's going to become a time when he's going to be he's the one that you're going to have to get the staff on you. So you got to see where the staff feels about Mr. Henton. I'm sure he doesn't have, maybe he has some friends, but he doesn't probably have too many if he's like that. And you have to try to build a relationship. So you have some peer pressure on Mr. Henton if he can, and try to get him to see your way. I made the analogy before, when you have a tough class as a teacher, when you go into a tough class and there's a kid, to try to get the class on your, to get the class on your side, basically to control the class, you know what kid you have to take on to get that done. What a lot of teachers do, they don't want to take that kid on right away. So they take on the wallflower next to them or some other kids because they know they're not going to get, somebody striking back, not physically striking back, but coming back at them. So what they do, they take on them. But guess what? That doesn't make a difference, because that kid's, until you take on directly the kid that causes the main problem, you're not going to get that class. It doesn't happen that way. So he's like, a kid in the class with your staff that you're going to have to deal with. It's a long-term situation. I mean, in the end, if he doesn't come around, matter of fact, I don't even know how do they qualify for the gifted class? Does he make those decisions, or there's a lot of questions, So, but with Mr. Henton, if he didn't come around, he wouldn't be teaching the gifted class for me anymore, within a certain amount of time.
Yep. One more, and then we'll move on. Jeff.
I would just say, I would definitely have a union rep with me at that meeting, because to not have one, first of all, it kind of raises the level of seriousness of the problem. And then also, if you don't have it, then that's something they can come back and complain about later. Sure. Oh, you asked me to come in for a conversation, and it turns out it was a disciplinary thing. So that would be my approach to it.
Love it. Great conversation here. Here we go. Let's see what happens when we chose C.
What was the rationale for your choice?
We just talked about that.
You decide to ask AP Griffin to gather some additional information on Mr. Henton's performance prior to having a formal conversation with Mr. Henton. You also speak with some students who note that some of them like Mr. Henton and are fine coasting along in his class, whereas others are eager to learn and feel cheated out of opportunities for real learning. After speaking with Mr. Henton, AP Griffin reports that execution was not successful. Mr. Henton was somewhat defiant, saying he's been teaching these kids far longer than any of the administrators have been here, and he knows what the students can and can't handle in terms of material. However, during a brief observation, AP Griffin noted that of a 30-minute lesson in the class, only half that time was spent on content. The remaining half was given over to open discussion about sports. The AP also reports that one student slept through a lesson in the general class, and Mr. Henton did nothing. Based on input from other parents, it sounds like many students complain about not getting called on in class, even though participation is a part of their grade. In addition, students report that it doesn't matter if they do homework or not. It's not checked, and there are no grades. The general class seems to be taught in a way that indicates the knowledge gained is not very useful in real life. Considering the discipline issue in Mr. Henton's gifted class, you recognize that a review of his referral history is in order. You can see that referrals are given almost exclusively to students of color, with the exception of those that are involved in sports. Upon further investigation, you notice that athletes are given multiple warnings prior to a discipline referral. These actions seem to be hindering equitable opportunities to learn in his classroom. Considering Mrs. Baldwin's comments about her son Andrew's experiences, together with what AP Griffin reported, you see that Mr. Henton is teaching to low expectations in his general classes, which limits students' opportunities to perform to their full potential. Considering some of the comments relayed by Mrs. Melendez regarding Mr. Henton's issues with new groups of students, you recognize that Mr. Henton's distance from newer groups of immigrant students may need to be addressed in terms of cultural competency. How would you open the conversation when you speak to him later in the day?
Right, you have 4 choices. I'll relaunch a poll. Two responses, 3 responses, 3 different choices. All right, I'm going to send you into a breakout room just for 2 minutes again. It's going to go quick here. Here we go. Talk about what letter you chose and why. All right, welcome back to the early groups here. Hopefully you had a good discussion in your group. I'm gonna open it up here for one of the caveats of one of the choices are none of these options seems good to me. Is there anybody that either thinks that or is anybody that actually voted for that on the poll?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I had felt that the bigger thing to focus on was the structure of lessons and the lack of content in the lessons. If so much time is spent discussing the non-lesson, that I think that would be the first thing to look into.
Yep, you're going to hammer the instruction or take that pathway. It's great. Can't argue that.
That's neutral too, in the sense of cultural competency and equity. It's politically neutral. You're not doing your job.
I like it. All right, I'm going to keep this rolling. The most people chose the 4th option. So let's see how that plays out.
Later in the day, you discuss the recent issue with Mr. Henton regarding Mr. Turner's daughter in his gifted class. You discuss the impact of discipline referrals on equity in the classroom, and Mr. Henton scoffs. He replies that he will not tolerate disruption or distractions. His class is for students who want to learn, and those are the students he teaches to. He says, if that is inequitable, well, so is the world. And students should be ready for the consequences of their actions when they grow up to be contributing members of society. How will you respond to Mr. Henton?
Okay, we're getting towards the end here. I'm going to launch a poll. You may vote. See the votes rolling in. Tricky one. We have all 4 options in this class right now, or in this group. All right, I'm just gonna end the poll. I'm gonna share the results with you. Look how even that is. I mean, we could spend a lot of time talking about this, couldn't we? Oh, that's great. I love it. But the second option seemed like it was the chosen the most. So I want to respect everybody's time. I want to choose that. And let's see what happens based on that.
You feel that Mr. Henton wants to do a good job, but he's not even aware of the impact his discipline methods can have on his students' learning. You frame his behavior in terms of fairness. Is it fair for him to refer a student for discipline if that perceived infraction is ultimately insignificant? Is it fair for him to define the same behavior as tolerable for one student or set of students, while it is grounds for discipline for another student or students? Mr. Henton responds that it may not be fair, but as a teacher, he feels it is his job to discipline students how he sees fit, which calls for applying the judgment that he has built up over years of experience. After some back and forth, Mr. Henton acknowledges that his judgment around discipline can be misapplied, which can limit opportunities for some students. Elaborate on your response, including any additional points you would make with Mr. Henton at this time.
Pass.
Wow, you shared a lot with me today. Things that I didn't quite realize were happening in my classroom that were impacting student learning. I want to do the best for every student in my class. Thank you for showing support. I really look forward to working hard and becoming a better teacher.
All right. There's a lot to unpack there because whenever I present this, it always seems like people are trying to be like, he came around really fast. Is he being genuine? Or is he just telling me what he needs to tell me to get out of my office right now? Like, what's going through your head right now?
That's not really realistic from our experience there. That's going to be the response. You know, and I don't think any of us would expect him to just turn around like that. You know, it's going to take a lot of examples and discussion with him to get him to, you know, based on how he wasn't listening before, all of a sudden to listen a little bit.
Sure. So you're saying not realistic. You weren't saying like, oh, he's just not being genuine. He just wants to get this over with right now. What else are you thinking out there? What are your thoughts?
I think that's the perfect simulated response to the utopian ending.
It's part of why I chose the first option, which was kind of beginning with having him speak more to his practices, because I think in reality you have to kind of meet people where they're at. You know, like you have to assume positive like intentions, like he's not a terrible person, he doesn't want to disadvantage his students. So talk to me about, you know, I think kind of getting back at like, what are you know, obviously there's issues on all those levels. You need to develop a plan with him. But I think kind of finding a way to get him on board with it is sort of really important in terms of like, talk to me about what you think is going well in your classrooms. What are those things you really want to preserve? How can we make sure that more kids are being successful and that parents aren't upset about what's happening? And kind of building off of wherever that entry point that he will give you on a certain extent. Unless obviously if you have to force it, you have to force it, but that rarely kind of works.
Yep. Phil, we just met, and I can tell that it's very important to you as a leader to meet people where they're at. So that's great. Okay, so Nick just added something to the chat feature. If you wanted to learn more, if you wanted, he added a link in there. But even though we didn't make it all the way to the end of the simulation on time, we made it through like about 92% of it. So we got, that's a great stopping point because it's a great conversation to have. Like, is that dude genuine or is he just, it's just a great way to end. So what are your thoughts or questions? I'll hang around as long as you have thoughts and questions, but that's all that I have for my presentation here today. So thanks for joining the school Sims a demonstration session about cultural competence. And I'll just open it up for what are your thoughts? What are you thinking right now?
I would just love to go through these types of experience with my colleagues here. I think like the conversation, there's kind of, it seems like there's rarely one right answer to any of these things. And it's kind of that like, you know, calibrating, processing with other people that are sharing that work within the context that you do it. Really, really helpful. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. There are a lot of admin teams that do this to like build culture and build cohesion. And also it demonstrates that you are building leadership capacity and that it's important to build that on your team.
I like the just the fact that you're dealing with kind of a situation that you don't have ties to specifically, you know, with the people, because we know that a lot of these things, you know, at least from that simulation are somewhat realistic, you know, and those are things that could be happening in our buildings. And it would be an interesting experience to go through with the staff without having to worry about, well, you're talking about one of my teacher and all the defensiveness that sometimes gets associated with trying to talk out real situations. So I like that part of it.
Yeah, I noticed that it took me a couple of years, and you did this earlier, but I wrote a peer-reviewed journal article that got published about how simulations create a safe space for professional discourse, because it's not something so personal, but people start bringing in their like value systems and their prior experiences and maybe their biases even, and you get some depth and some layers pretty quickly with the Sims. So
yeah, we normally spend a lot of time, as we say, calibrating for our pedagogy in the classroom, but spending that time calibrating some of the ways in which you have to deal with disciplinary situations, which, you know, is multifaceted, is just like you said, is a great way to if you will, in a lot of senses, calibrate yourself as you're going through it. And it's a nice way, actually. I see this being very beneficial to start a school year, because it kind of gets the mind kind of going again about, okay, what are things that you have to, you know, that you may run into as you go through a school year, especially for your new staff too.
sure. Yeah. I mean, there are teacher Sims too, for like the latest one that they made was parent teacher conferences. Think how valuable that is to give somebody an experience with a crabby parent at a parent teacher conference before they actually do it for the first time. You know, that's just tremendously good. But you use the word calibration. One time I helped a HR team at a really large district use simulations to calibrate how they document discipline situations with teachers. And they all experienced a sim, and then they had to document using their forms. And then they all came together and they're like, what did you write? Well, what did you write? Pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else? All right. Well, it's very nice to meet you all. And just look me up at Dakota State University if you have any questions. Otherwise, I wish you a great holiday season, and thanks for your time today.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, David. Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Happy holidays.